A good writer must also be a good reader. So, writing community, writing friends out there, what are you reading these days, and how will you use it to influence or improve your writing? This is Sam with another Friday video for you. I hope to answer that question in just a moment for myself. But usually when I open with that question, I'm talking about a fiction read, and I have been doing book reviews of my fiction reads, and I'll do one of those probably next week too. But last few times I did a nonfiction read that has either been a craft of writing or helped with some aspect of writing. And today I kind of want to do that again. And stick with me because this is not directly related to writing, but I'll tell you why it's significant. Um, Let me show you the last nonfiction book I read, and how it connects to my writing. Okay, so this is Blood Covenant by Michael Franzese. I think it's Franzese. I'm not sure if it's Franzese or Franzese. I think it's Franzese. Um, he's a public figure you may have heard of. It says he was one of the few people to have quit the mob publicly and lived. This is his autobiography of his story of how that all happened. It's him writing about his own life, telling his own story. He was the son of one of the most powerful mob bosses in New York, or at least the part of New York, some time ago. His dad was like wasn't just in the mob, but was like the boss of the mob. And Michael grew up in that life, in that environment, and became a mafia captain when he was old enough, and committed some crimes. He was in. He tells the story. He was in mostly white collar crime. He like defrauded the federal government of tax money and of gas money and things like that. And he goes into it. I don't quite quite know all the details of how that works, and I don't want to like go into details of how to commit crimes. But he did all these things, and made obviously was rich and successful and everything, but also didn't really have peace because he's living the mob life, and you're always kind of on the run or looking over your shoulder maybe. Long story short, he fell in love, married a girl, became a Christian, turned his life around, and quit the mob. He became a family man and a church going man and all this stuff, and denounced the mob. And surprisingly, he hasn't died. He hasn't been killed. He's an author. He's written this book and a number of other books about his experiences. He does speaking engagements and all kinds of stuff. So he's willing to talk about his experiences, and is pretty open about that. And he hasn't been killed. He did say at one point in the book that like most of his former mob associates were either dead or in prison also. So that would probably explain why no one has been able to kill him. But also, I believe, and some of you believe too, he became a Christian. I think God had a plan for him. So anyway, this is his story. This is his autobiography about growing up in the mob and then leaving the mob and all that stuff. So what does that have to do with with writing? I'm not necessarily recommending this book to all writers. It's a good book if you want to read a cool story about an interesting person who's had an unusual life and lives to tell about it. Um, but my story deals with organized crime, at least somewhat. It's a superhero story. Some of you have heard bits and pieces of it. There's a major element of organized crime. One of my major characters, is the daughter of a crime boss, and she rebels against him and becomes a crime fighter on her own when she's like a teenager. Um, and then I didn't originally intend this. I was just trying to think of a backstory for her, but by virtue of that relationship being kind of front and center to her, her father also became a major character. So I have the father crime boss and the daughter crime fighter who was raised in that lifestyle, who are now semi major characters in my story. And and it may surprise some of you, but I do not have much personal experience with the mafia, and by much I mean any, and by surprise I mean not at all. So where do I get my information on the mafia so far? You know, Tropes of the genre, parodies, I don't know, comic books, things like that. There are some superhero shows that I think have done it more realistically and probably better than others, like the Dark Knight trilogy portrays organized crime. Daredevil portrays organized crime. I think those are toward the more realistic end, to my knowledge. But again, I don't know because I'm not really in that area. So that's one reason a friend suggested this book to me, because it's like this person has grown up in the mob and knows actually what the inner workings of the mob are like, and is able to, and willing to tell about it to many people. So, like I said, this isn't necessarily, this specific book isn't necessarily the one you need for your story. Although, if your story also involves organized crime, I think this is a good resource. But my point here, kind of now, is today is read a book or a few books that deal with your subject, that deal with a subject that you don't know much about, that you need for your story. So I think this one is good because, well, for a lot of reasons. But I'm sure there's lots of books that I can read on the mob, researchers or scholars. I mean, I don't know, but do people have a doctorate in studying the mob, studying organized crime? I guess criminology is a thing, so maybe I don't know how much of that works. That is. Anyway, what I'm saying is I'm sure there's books out there by researchers and articles and resources you can find. All that stuff is good too. I'm not knocking any of it, but I don't know. I find myself drawn lately to autobiographies and stuff. I mean, I haven't read like a ton of them, but I just think it's really cool to hear another person telling their story, and to hear that person telling, here's my life, here's how I got to where I am today, here's the culture I grew up in versus where I am now. I mean, it's not every autobiography is a story of dramatic transformation. Maybe not as dramatic as this one, but when they are, it's cool. So. I've read a few others recently, not for my writing purposes, just for other purposes, but that have been interesting. But this one is helpful for that reason. But he didn't have to research the mob, is what I'm saying. He grew up in it. He lived it firsthand, and so he's telling his experience. And so I'm sure there's other sources out there that are authentic too, and accessible and helpful on the topic of organized crime. But this guy lived it. He knows the inner workings. He grew up in that. And so I pretty much assume his descriptions of mob life are pretty accurate when he tells about the way things are done, the way people talk, or I don't know, just the business ventures they get into, or how how those things are handled, or even the things like violence and killings when he talks about those. And court cases, things like that. I assume it's all accurate. I had asked a lawyer friend of mine, actually Corbin Payne, he's been on here before on my interviews and stuff. I asked him for some writing advice. Well, not writing advice, but just like for some expertise on some of those aspects as well, because he's a lawyer. And again, my knowledge of lawyers and the courtroom is like from TV shows and comic books, because I have not spent much time in courtrooms, and so. So like I was asking some questions about, like, what would it take to convict this guy if they were trying to bring down the crime boss of my novel and stuff like that. And he did have some good suggestions. So you can always ask a friend or ask an expert too, a friend who knows something. But another good resource is an autobiography or a first-hand account or something like that. Something that deals with your topic. He actually tells a story of how his dad eventually was convicted, and actually, ironically enough, he was framed. I mean, he had done lots of other stuff too. He had done lots of other bad stuff, but he was actually sent to jail for something he didn't do. So, ironically, anyway, he tells more about that. If you're interested in reading that book, you can. But I guess my exhortation today to writers is do your research on whatever topic you have, and find, if you don't know it, find someone who does. If you're writing about and now I'm trying to think of semi-realistic things, because some of us write fantasy and stuff, and I assume you're not reading. I assume you're not reading a first-person biography of a magical wizard, but I mean, if you find someone, if your story deals with organized crime, or I don't know, some other profession or lifestyle that you're featuring in your story because you think it's cool or it's interesting, but you don't know anything about it firsthand, I encourage you, read some books, find someone who's lived that road and gone on that path, and do a little research before your next writing or before your next editing, and I think it'll make your story that much better. I think this will improve my edits and hopefully my future installments as well. I'm planning to focus more on the organized crime in probably book 3, which I've outlined but not drafted yet. So anyway, there it is. That's my exhortation for you today. Hope it helps. Hope you get some good research in and read some good books along the way. And keep writing, keep doing your thing, keep being productive. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Bye.